version of the opening title because we have 8 questions to answer this time. That's more than I've ever received in a single month. So this might just be the longest Q&A video so far. So let's dive right into question number 1, shall we? The only one I've known personally was a local bodybuilder named Pam House. She was a fixture at local physique competitions back in the 80s. We met shortly after she'd won the women's overall title at the Central Florida Championships in 1986, if I remember correctly, the first bodybuilding show I attended in person. She was a clerk in a local GNC at the time. We started talking. She appreciated my interest in women's bodybuilding, and I, and my wife when she wasn't working, would cheer her on at her contests around the Central Florida area. Sadly, I've lost touch with her. She didn't progress as far in the sport as she wanted because of her refusal to do steroids, and I have no idea where she might be today. But she was very influential on my work. In fact, the Satin Steel story Contest Jitters was based on something that actually happened to her. She missed preliminaries at a contest she'd entered, and this placed her very low in the ranking because she had no score from the prejudgings. I took that basic incident and added the element of a devious co-competitor who deliberately lied to Satin to keep her out of the prejudgings. I even did an internet search for her, but I found hundreds of women named Pamela House, too many to search through to find the one I knew. I'm not even sure she lives in Orlando anymore. I would like to know what became of her. I hope she's well and happy. I'd love for there to be. I still think from time to time that I should do something. Start her comic up for reals. Then I find some new toy to play with, like Tetsuko's Odyssey or Kaiju Fighter Tetsuko, and my other projects go pfft. I even hooked up with someone whose writing I like a lot. He's written a couple of Dinah fan fictions that I think I'd like to adapt to canon stories. But he's gotten so involved in his own writing and his job and life in general that we've never been able to pin down a proper first story for Dinah. I haven't forgotten her though. I haven't abandoned her, and I hope I can get her series started sometime soon. Yes, she has. Her problem, though, is that she's now so strong that an ordinary gym doesn't have enough weights to give her a good workout. After all, I've already established her heaviest known lift is 670 tons. That's 1,340,000 pounds. Assuming you could find a bar long enough and strong enough to hold all that weight, she could pile every plate in any gym onto a single bar and merely get a good pump. Sonia is still trying to help her out by designing exotic technologies for testing and training her strength. The most promising approach right now is the multiplication of local gravity in a small enclosure so that a device the size of a 100-pound barbell can weigh as much as 500 or 600 tons for as long as the power supply lasts. But until something like that is practical, Tetsuko has to get creative with her lifts, like Mr. Incredible lifting railroad cars in the movie The Incredibles. for the same reason I do most of what I do, because I thought it was a fun idea. The same reason I thought about taking a bodybuilder and putting her in outrageous adventures against weird villains in Satin Steel. The same reason I thought it'd be fun to create a heroine with gigantic breasts who fights crime in the nude, Charlotte. And as with most of my later creations, the idea just kind of came to me. It started when I found the deviant art gallery of Pseudo5348. He likes to pit his character Ultra Woman H against giant monsters, mostly from the various Ultraman series that have been running for decades on Japanese TV. And in most of his pics, Ultra Woman H is in some sort of distress, strangled by a tentacle-like appendage, knocked down by a powerful tail, sprayed with some sort of paralyzing gas, cocooning web, or quick hardening foam. And as I viewed these pics, the thought crept into my mind, how would one of my characters fare against a Daikaiju? What if one of my girls had the power to grow to giantess size to take on giant monsters? You may remember I even ran a poll here on Patreon to find out which of my characters you'd like to see get the giantess treatment. And although there were some interesting responses, there were some who wanted to see a hyper-muscular Sonya grow giant size, the clear winner was the one who I really wanted to use, Tetsuko. And it has been fun coming up with the concepts, the monsters, the supporting cast, including a couple of characters I based on real-life friends and acquaintances. I have the first issue written and laid out, ready to draw. And a follow-up question. Oh, in a variety of ways. It seems only logical to me that because Tetsuko's transformation into a giantess is the result of science, well, comic book science, and not magic, that when she grows, her clothes don't. So a couple of the challenges facing our heroines. For Tetsuko, being naked in public while fighting these creatures, and for Sonya, the almost impossible task of developing a fabric to make clothes that she can wear to protect her modesty. Clothes which can stretch to 75 to 100 times their normal size, then shrink back to normal size when Tetsuko does. As to how the public reacts, I'm already addressing that in the first issue. There's a scene in which Tetsuko and Sonya are speeding to the scene of the monster's rampage, and Sonya tells Tetsuko, "Keep in mind, Tetchan, you'll have to fight this monster naked. Your clothes don't grow with you." Tetsuko replies, "Are you trying to talk me out of this fight? I've been naked in public before. Remember all those arena fights I was in with Red?" Referring to her adventures in the past when she and Red the Paladin were indeed forced to engage in nude gladiator battles. Sonya counters, "But you haven't been 300 feet tall and naked in public. And need I remind you, there'll most likely be extensive news coverage and curious onlookers with cell phones. Videos of your 10-foot snatch will go viral within an hour of your fight." So that's one reaction the public will have to a giant naked Tetsuko. The news media will have an especially tough time. They'll be continually apologizing to their viewers for the nudity they'll have to show in order to report on her battles, until they can figure out how to utilize the same technology that allows sports broadcasters to project virtual 10-yard lines and other graphics onto live football game broadcasts to cover Tetsuko's naughty bits in real time. I expect the reaction will also include Some of the more prudish among the public who somehow believe that Tetsuko has no business being naked in public, even if it is to try to stop a giant monster's rampage, and can't find clothes to fit her when she does. They'd rather see the monster destroy people's lives than see a naked woman in public. Well, that question was asked before in March of 2017, so let me replay the answer I gave back then. I have a little, but Battle of the Space Amazons is someone else's story. Someone who uses the name Gribble paid me to illustrate the story, and though we did bat around a couple of ideas for a sequel some years ago, nothing came of it. And quite frankly, I have my own characters who need their adventures continued, and in some cases, started. And nothing has changed since that time. I don't know if Gribble is still interested in writing a sequel, and Great Maker knows I've got enough of my own stuff to do. So let's move on to a couple of questions that made it in just under the wire. Yes and no. She has an alter ego, but not a secret identity. This might get a little confusing because when I first created Starburst, her alter ego's name was Melissa Lockhart. A few years later, when I decided to retire Starburst in favor of the new superheroine I'd created, Dinah the Damsel Dynamo, I decided to change Dinah's secret identity name from Dina Charles to Melissa Lockhart for two reasons. One, I was very fond of the name Melissa Lockhart and didn't want to see it go unused. I figured if I ever brought Starburst back, I could always give her a different name. And two, I came to think that the similarity between Dina's secret identity name and Dinah's superheroine name was a little too cute for my taste. So I lifted Melissa from Starburst and gave it to Dinah. So at the present time, Starburst's alter ego doesn't have a name, and she also has no secret identity either. Without going into the details of Starburst's origins, I'll simply say that the circumstances of Melissa's transformation into Starburst were somewhat public. That and the fact that, like the aforementioned Clark Kent, Melissa, or whatever her name will be, doesn't transform from one physical form to another the way Dinah does. So, since she realizes it would be almost impossible to hide her tall, muscular form behind a dowdy suit and a pair of glasses, she simply decides to forego a secret identity altogether, like the Fantastic Four, whose identities are publicly known, as the official handbook of the Marvel Universe terms it. Although I am having a little fun with the idea of a superheroine with a distinctive appearance who is able to successfully hide it behind dowdy clothes and a pair of glasses with Charlotte and Naked Justice. Well, I'm certainly not going to rule out drawing one. I suppose I should make a more conscious effort to portray different races and ethnicities in my work. And if I did, she'd probably look something like this commission for a DeviantArt client of his character, the disco singer Bunny. And that brings the curtain down on another question and answer video. I really appreciate your pledges, your support, your attention, and your feedback. If you have any questions for the December video, please post them in the comments below, and we'll get together again in December.